Thank you very much, Robert. So, of course, I would like to warmly thank the organizer for inviting me for this remarkable event, not so common, in celebrating Alessio. And of course, as you mentioned it, I am attached to Optimal Transportation, and it was a great pleasure to see that the field committee mentioned for the first time, I think, optimal transportation for field medalists. Because even in the case of Cédric Villani, I think it was not officially mentioned. Okay, and so today I would like to talk about something which is connected to optimal transportation in some sense. And this is about solving initial value problems by convex minimization techniques and some connection with the emerging field of matrix valued optimal transport. Okay, so the idea of solving IVP by convex minimization is not really new, because if you have a linear equation, of course a linear PDE, well, it is quite natural to try to solve the equation by squaring the equation and trying to the minimal value. So if the equation is linear, of course, the square will give you a convex minimization functional. However, for nonlinear equation, this technique doesn't work, although it is clearly used in many fields and related topics, typically like data assimilation for weather forecasting is a lot about minimizing functional, including the PDE you want to solve. Okay, for nonlinear system, there have been some very remarkable contributions starting in the 70s. And I think with the paper, a short paper of Brésis and Eklund. And this has been developed a lot, in particular in Canada with Nassib Boussoub, who wrote many papers on that, and also related techniques by Mielke and Stefanelli, and Vicintin and other people. So the technique I would like to discuss today is different in the sense that it is based on the weak formulation of PDEs and on some duality trick. And I started using this idea, and the first domain of application was the class of systems of first-order conservation laws with a convex entropy, which is a very important class of evolution PDEs, including the Euler equation of compressible gases, for instance. And you can see that on the paper published in 2018. I also focused on the incompressible Euler equation, and this was followed nicely by Dmitry Borotnikov, and you can see application to many equations related to fluid mechanics in this preprint. So today, I would like to concentrate on the different type of PDEs. I would say on parabolic equation. And my first example will be the porous medium equation. And next, the viscous Hamilton-Jacobi equation. And I will talk about the incompressible Navier-Stokes equation. So don't expect new breakthrough really on the Navier-Stokes equation, but you will see that the convex minimization problem related to the Navier-Stokes equation has some very interesting structure. Okay, so now let me move to the first case, which is the porous medium equation. For simplicity, I consider only the quadratic case. So it's a heat equation with a quadratic nonlinearity. And to make sense, to make it well posed, I assume that the solution is non-negative. And I will address the equation in the periodic cube for simplicity. So this equation actually has some interest because it can be seen as the macroscopic limit of some system of particles. We have seen a system of particles. Oh, there is a question already.
Jan, I think we are not seeing your slides. Or at least I'm not seeing them. Maybe you should share the...
I'm seeing them. That's strange.
You're seeing them. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm not sure. Okay, I'm sorry.
Whoops.
We lost
No, I'm
Francesco.
not.
Do you see them?
Yeah. It's fine.
Do we want to? I mean,
Francesco,
let's
you are
say.
unmuted.
So there's 60 people logged in. Maybe we can have a show of hands for how many cannot see the slides.
I have fixed it. I think it was my problem then.
Okay, all right,
I
great.
have fixed it. Yeah.
Great,
Thanks.
thanks.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
Oh yeah, okay. So everybody can see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so for instance, this equation can be obtained by looking at the system of particles like the following. So we had talks about system of particles already. There was a talk of Luigi Ambrosio already and Silvia Sarfatti. And here, this is a kind of a friction-dominated system where particles are driven by the potential, the gradient of a kind of Gaussian potential of interaction. And I mentioned that because the grandfather of Alessio, Pierre Lyons, actually wrote a nice paper with Sylvie Masgalic on this issue. And it was not exactly the same setting. And I think when Alessio was probably a student in Lyon, I guess, he worked on that with Filipovsky on the stochastic version of this. And that's another stuff. Of course, there are many other papers, but this is interesting topics, which is really mixing a parabolic equation and system of particles. Actually,
Jan, it was during the period at Bonn when you were also there. You remember in 2007.
Okay. It was even before, but probably in the
same time.
I guess you are affiliated to Lyon or something like that, maybe on the paper. Okay. So this is from Bonn. Okay. Okay. I didn't know that you did that in Bonn. Okay. So let's move to the next slides.
So these particles are repelling each other, it looks like, right? But the repulsion is suppressed at large distances.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, okay. I'm not so sure. I'm very confused with science, you know. So the first time I have to drive with my professor, he told me to go to the right and I went to the left. But there was no penalty because he said that it is not against the law. So sorry about that. But I think let me see. Yeah, this is repelling, but in some sense there is a confinement. So there is an equilibrium. Yeah, that's correct. This is what you said. Yeah.
I said they're repelling, but the repulsion is suppressed at large distances.
Yeah, that's correct. Absolutely. Okay, so let me move to the next one. So the strange idea is to try to minimize the time integral of the L2 norm of the solution, well, on the space-time domain. So the space-time domain will be always denoted by capital Q, and this is a finite time interval. So capital T will be always fixed and finite. And also, as I said, for convenience, I will work only on the flat torus, on the periodic cube. So now you want to minimize that among all weak solutions of the equation satisfying the initial condition, which is given to you. So the only data given to me is the initial condition. But you are looking at weak solution starting from this initial condition, and you want to minimize the time integral of the L2 norm. So of the square L2 norm. This looks ridiculous because for such parabolic equation, in principle, we have uniqueness of weak solution. So this is like minimizing a quantity on a set which is unique with a unique element, which is a solution you want to look at, to look for. So this is total nonsense. Anyway, it is quite interesting to go forward. So the first thing to do is to write this problem in the saddle point formulation, which is written here. So the optimal number will be capital I of U0. So it depends only on the initial condition. And this is defined as the infimum with respect to U and the supremum with respect to phi of something. So the supremum with respect to phi is encoding that U will be a weak solution with initial condition U0. Why is it so? Because if you look at the quantity with respect to phi, this is linear in phi, affine in phi, and so the supremum is either 0 or plus infinity, and it is plus infinity when precisely U is not a weak solution of the equation, because you can recover by integration by parts the weak formulation of the porous medium equation, including the initial condition U0. So the supremum in phi, once the phi, you know that U is a weak solution, the supremum in phi collapses to the integral of U squared, and you are back to the original problem I started with. Just minimizing the square space-time square L2 norm of U. Okay, so for this formulation, the only thing we need is U to be a square integrable function on the space-time domain, and the test function phi should be smooth. But very importantly, the test function should vanish at the final time, because in the weak formulation, in order to include the initial condition and only the initial condition, I need phi not to vanish at 0, but to vanish at time capital T. So that's very important. Of course, since I wrote the problem as a saddle point problem, there is an obvious dual problem, which is obtained by exchanging the supremum and the infimum in the formulation. So a priori, this is not the same number. So this new number J of U0 is always not larger than I U0, but it could be different. So there might be some duality gap. The good thing about J, as we will see, that it's a very nice convex optimization problem. Why is it so? Because the infimum in U selects a concave function of phi. So this is the resulting problem is a maximization of a convex functional of phi automatically, because of the weak formulation, even if the equation is nonlinear, the weak formulation is expressed in a linear way with respect to the test function. Okay. So now I can rewrite. So this is just the dual problem. I just rewrote the dual problem. And now computing the value of the dual problem is super trivial, because the infimum with respect to U has no constraints whatsoever, and there is no derivative on U. So you can do pointwise minimization, and you can pointwise minimize the square. So everybody, including myself, can do that, right? So what you get, of course, U square is multiplied, if you look carefully, by 1 minus Laplacian of phi. So if the Laplacian of phi exceeds 1, of course, the infimum will be minus infinity. So implicitly, you have an inequality constraint in the supremum in phi that the requirements that Laplacian of phi should be pointwise less than 1. And so after elementary computation, we get minus the square of the time derivative of phi divided by 1 minus Laplacian of phi plus the time boundary term, the initial term, condition term. It's a space-time integral term, but it involves U0, which is only a function of x. And of course, at this moment, it's very tempting to write sigma is equal to 1 minus Laplacian of phi, and to treat it as a kind of density field, which is non-negative, and to define Q as the time derivative of phi, so that sigma and Q are linked by a linear PD, which is just that the dt of sigma is balanced by the Laplacian of Q. And therefore, by doing this, we write a nice concave minimization problem involving something that looks like the kinetic energy term in the optimal transportation theory, minus Q squared divided by sigma, plus the term involving the initial condition U0. And we have the final condition for sigma, that sigma time capital T should be uniformly equal to 1. which is inherited from the fact that the test function phi was supposed to vanish at time capital T. Okay, so since phi vanishes at capital T, 1 minus Laplacian of phi should be 1, and therefore sigma should be 1 at time capital T. So you see that the resulting problem has a lot of similarity with the so-called dynamical formulation of the optimal transportation problem that the experts know very well. And as a matter of fact, there is a crucial difference, because here Q is a scalar field. It is not a vector valued field. And we don't get the divergence operator in the linear equation, but the Laplace operator. So it's a different problem. However, it is related to optimal transport by the so-called version of martingale optimal transport. And here it is related to a nice paper recently published, or I mean, at least in the archive, by Huysmans and Trevisan, which is about a time dynamical formulation à la Benhamou-Brenier, as I say, for the martingale optimal transport problem. So this works in 1D. And it is not exactly the same problem, because the problem has two time boundary conditions, because sigma would be prescribed at both time 0 and both at time 1, and they should be related by some convexity order to make sense. But anyway, this is the same problem in the one space dimension, and they already observed that this problem is related to the Porous-Medium equation in 1D. But it's a more general feature of the problem I just wrote, which is which makes sense in higher dimension. Let me mention that the martingale optimal transport problem has been very popular in the recent years. It started in the financial mathematics, and Canadian mathematicians were very much involved, in particular Nassif Gussoub and Kim, who is speaking very soon, and a young guy, I forgot to mention his name, but maybe Robert knows the...
Aaron Palmer?
What?
Aaron
Palmer, yes. Yeah, Gussoub, Kim, and Palmer are very active on that field also.
So Jan, I just have a quick question about the domain of integration. So
space-time, yes.
Like Q is time, space-time?
Oh yeah, because I didn't want to divide the Q square by 2, so I put the 2 at the other place. Is it the
No, the domain, the domain capital.
The domain is space-time. So maybe there is something that you might be confused with. So maybe could I go backward with the slides, just to go back to this formulation? Because here you see that the term involving U0 is U0 depends only on X.
Right.
So when you integrate in time, dt phi, you get a boundary term actually. And that's a classic, I mean, this is a rather standard way of including the initial condition in the weak formulation. This is not the most usual one, but this is. So you have really only space-time integral.
Thanks.
Yes. Okay, so let me go back slowly to, okay, this is okay. Okay, so this is the first example I wanted to show to you. Actually, this is not really new, because I remember that in PISA in 2018, I presented already the Porous-Medium equation this way. But at that time, I didn't know the connection with martingale optimal transport, and I think the work of Huysmans and Trevisan was not yet written or published at that time. Okay, so let me tell you how you can show that there is no duality gap in this problem, in some sense that we are really solving the right problem. And this is based, I think this was a nice observation that actually the key points for the no duality result is this very nice estimate on the Porous-Medium equation, which is the Aronson-Bénélan estimate, which in the quadratic case is very simple to write. It tells you that for every solution of the porous medium equation, the Laplacian of U is always bounded from below by minus k kappa, and kappa is just an explicit constant depending on d, divided by t. So this is very reminiscent of the Oleinik condition for the Burgers equation, and actually it is related. And thanks to these estimates, it is very easy to get the result, the duality result. At least, I mean, for the proof I did, I didn't want to be fancy, so I just assumed that the initial condition was smooth and positive. Okay, which is not the most interesting case, but at least you can do it. So the idea is very simple. So since you know that there is a nice solution, you use this solution to solve the backward part of the optimality condition of the saddle point problem, which is just a linear equation with coefficient depending on u, which is written here, with the final condition that phi is 0. And of course, if we write that for alpha, alpha was denoted by sigma, but to avoid confusion, I use the letter alpha here. For the combination 1 minus Laplacian of phi, you get this kind of weird parabolic equation where the Laplacian is really out of the nonlinearity. And I claim that very easily you get a lower bound on alpha, which is like t divided by capital T to the power kappa, so which depends on the final time. And this is very useful because now we are sure that at least this alpha will be non-negative. And you remember that alpha here is substituting for sigma, and sigma was a density field supposed to be non-negative. So let me just flash the slide to give you the proof, which is just elementary application of the maximum principle. So you write you expand the Laplacian of the nonlinearity, and you get 4 terms, and you use the maximum principle. So of course, the first derivative at the maximum, actually it's not the maximum, the infimum in x of alpha cancels the first order term, so you get a sign for the Laplacian of alpha, and then you use the Aronson-Bendilan estimate for the Laplacian of u. So if you do that, you get very easily that the time derivative of the infimum, capital A of t, satisfy this inequality, and of course by integration you get an inequality for the logarithm of a, and from that you get the lower bound on the infimum of alpha. So in some sense, there will be no vacuum created until the time 0. So at time 0, this might vanish, but this is okay because actually it's useful because it means that will be able to handle initial conditions even if they are completely supported in some sense. Okay, so that's the main argument. So it's very elementary. And now for to check that there is no duality gap, it's absolutely trivial to do because we just compute what we have obtained by solving this equation in phi. And this is a candidate to be an optimal value for capital J. Actually, it's not, you don't need to know that. We just know that capital J of U0 will be certainly larger or equal to little j, because this is a definition of capital J. And by using the equation again, we can rewrite the terms involving U0. And we get the second evaluation of J. And from this, you recognize by combining 1 minus Laplacian of phi that we just obtain the integral of U square. And the integral of U square is a candidate to be the optimal value of capital I, and it's certainly larger than the value of capital I, because capital I is the minimal value of the time integral of the L2 norm for every weak solution. So what is very nice with this proof, you don't need to know anything. You don't care about uniqueness of solution. You just need to know that there is a solution satisfying the Aronson-Benillon estimates. And therefore, capital J is larger than little j, which is larger than capital I. And capital I is by definition larger than capital J, because you remember J was the int soup and I is a soup inf. No, the other way around. Capital I was the int soup and capital J is a soup inf. So certainly capital I is larger than capital J. And so there is no duality gap. And so that's basically the end of the proof, which means that by this crazy process where we started with a silly problem, and by duality, we get a meaningful problem which is able to recover the solution. I don't explain how to recover the solution, but it's quite easy to do. Okay, so there are many problems pending because I didn't check really what happens if U0 is not smooth and compactly supported. I didn't check the case of the entire space where you have the Barenblatt solution. I didn't check whether it fits with the very nice result on the convergence to the Barenblatt profiles and blah, blah, blah. And maybe this formulation could be also useful from the point of view of regularity theory. Of course, regularity theory is a very important word for Alessio, because we could imagine to mimic what recently Michael Goldman and Felix Otto did for optimal transportation. They, instead of looking at the Monge-Ampère equation as Luis Caffarelli did, and of course Alessio and Guido De Filippis did to deal with the optimal transportation problem, we can also use the Benabou-Brenier formulation of the optimal transportation problem. And Goldman and Otto were able to use the regularity theory of, let's say, similar to minimal surfaces theory, to get a new proof of regularity of the solution of the optimal transport problem. So I wouldn't be surprised that the same kind of approach could be used maybe for this martingale problem. Or I would say, when I call martingale problem, it's only in 1D, but for this porous medium equation optimization problem. Okay, so, but of course, this is too difficult for me, so I wouldn't try to do that. Okay, so let me move to the second example, which is almost as simple, which is the viscous Hamilton-Jacobi equation. So also here, I concentrate on the quadratical Hamilton equation. So you see the formulation in terms of a potential phi, and I put the viscosity epsilon as a parameter because, of course, it is also interesting to look at the viscosity limit of this equation. Sorry, there is a typo because, of course, there is not equal to 0. Yeah, of course. So forget about the second equality, right? I hope you notice that. Okay, so just a test to see whether you are still awake. Okay, so blah, blah, blah. So the idea, in order to get the same structure of PD, nonlinear PD, where we can integrate by parts easily and get a linear formulation in the test function, I don't look at phi, I look at the gradient of phi that is denoted by B, and B solve this equation, dTB plus the gradient of B squared over 2 minus epsilon, the divergence of B is equal to 0, and you input as initial condition the gradient of phi 0. So of course, automatically B is a gradient because the equation has a gradient source term, and the initial condition is a gradient. However, we don't use the fact that B is a gradient. And this is in particular why I wrote gradient of divergence of P. So that's the right way to do it. Now I skip all the details. So you try to minimize the L2 norm of B. You compute the saddle point for problem. You do the formal duality. And after elementary calculation, this is what you get. So I change the sign to get a minimization problem, but I get the infimum with respect to two fields, rho and q. And here rho will be really a density, a non-negative density field, and Q a momentum field, a vector valued field. And so the quantity to be minimized involves the initial condition, Q dot be 0. So for Roberts, this is the same problem as before. It's a space-time integral, but in a hidden way, it's really a boundary term in time. The other term is very nice because you see that this is a square of a difference, and Q square over 2 rho is just like the kinetic energy in optimal transportation, and grad rho square divided by rho is the Fisher information. So everything looks very nice, looks very friendly. We have the continuity equation, and the final condition, sorry, is that the final density should be uniformly equal to 1.
Sorry, so I have a question, Jan.
Yes.
So in this, as in the first problem, you start out by saying, I'm going to minimize something among all weak solutions.
Yes.
But so you're assuming that weak solutions exist, or did you say that ultimately you were able to use it to show existence of weak solutions in the?
Yeah, actually, that's correct, because in the proof of the non-duality gap, I will be using the fact that there is a solution. And actually, because with epsilon, it's very easy. Anyway, even if you are, if you know the Hopf transform, that by using exponential transform, you know that the viscous Hamilton-Jacobi equation is just a heat equation.
Sure.
So even you have actually an explicit formula, and maybe you know this remarkable paper of Eberhard Hopf, which was the first way to solve the Burgers equation in a rigorous way. And so he was using essentially this trick of using and this is why is it called a Hopf transform, actually. And so no problem about that, but actually I don't really need so much about that. Actually, at the moment, I don't need anything about viscosity solution. Even in the case where epsilon equal to 0, I could do it also. Of course, this would be more complicated to discuss, but I could do it also in the case when epsilon is 0, and then you deal with any weak solution. You don't care about the viscosity solution at this level. Okay, so actually it was something very similar was mentioned by Luigi on Monday, that this kind of square actually contain the rectangle term is actually a null Lagrangian, because this can be integrated out in time. And if you do that, which is nice, you get the following formulation, where clearly we get the kinetic energy and the Fisher information separately. But since it is a null Lagrangian, there is a contribution as a boundary term in time. So this is why you see the time 0 appearing in this formulation, and the resulting term is the Boltzmann entropy of the initial value of the density field, plus an additional term. Okay, and of course, this problem looks very nice, and actually, it is extremely close to the well-known Schrödinger problem that I'm going to comment a little bit later on. Why is it so? The Schrödinger problem is the same problem you remove the boundary term at time 0, but you prescribe rho at time 0. So it's a 2-point boundary value problem in time, where rho is given at time 0 and time 1. So this is really the Schrödinger problem. So here we have a kind of mean field game or backward-forward version of the Schrödinger problem. So the Schrödinger problem, to the best of my knowledge, became very popular, at least in the PD community, thanks to Christian Leonard. And of course, it is related to many things. So I'm just mentioning the INRIA Mo-Kaplan team because they are good friends and I'm related to them. And they have been using this Schrödinger problem like crazy in the recent years, because it's a very efficient way to solve the optimal transportation problem in many situations, because of the epsilon parameter, which is a regularization parameter. You can use Gaussian kernel, you can use iterative methods that are very efficient, And this is quite useful in the setting of big data problems. And where actually introducing some regularization parameter is related to introducing some noise in the data. And for big data problems, noise is everywhere. So these people are very fond of the Schrödinger problem now, even for solving the optimal transportation problem. Okay, so I think it is time now to move to the big monster. Of course, the Navier-Stokes equation. Don't expect anything very serious here. There is no result about the duality gap here. This would be too nice. And I keep the same idea of minimizing V square among all weak solutions of the Navier-Stokes equations with initial condition V0. Okay, to go back to my first work, I really started my first work on this field by considering the Euler equation when epsilon is 0. And I was asked later on by Ulisse Stefanelli whether I could do something for the Navier-Stokes equation. And my first answer was, well, I mean, in Navier-Stokes equation, we cannot do the same thing because you know, V square is not conserved by the Navier-Stokes equation. It shouldn't work. Okay, and so I was pretty wrong. So it took to me about 2 years to figure out that it is interesting actually to minimize V square, in spite of the fact that V square is just dissipated by the Navier-Stokes equation. It's not preserved. Okay, so now I'm just writing down the minimization problem you get after writing the saddle point formulation of the problem and doing the duality. And this is what we get. So to my taste, it looks like a kind of a matrix value generalization of the kind of Schrödinger problem we had in the previous case. Why is it so? Because you see that we have the main quantities we are dealing with are momentum field, Q, as before, but now the density field, rho, is substituted for by a matrix valued field. So M now is a field of non-positive symmetric matrices. So, which is like a generalized version of density fields.
You've written non-negative.
Yeah, non-negative, sorry. And of course, there is a constraint between Q and M that can be seen as a kind of a generalized continuity equation where M and Q are related to each other by a linear first order constant coefficient PDE. So the novelty here is due to the divergence-free condition. There is a pseudo differential operator. There is a Riesz transform. The second derivative are balanced by the minus the inverse of the Laplacian on the torus, and therefore this is this collapse to a first order linear constant coefficient PDEs. And there is still a final boundary condition at time t, which is this density field, which should be identical to the identity matrix. So to summarize what I did for Navier-Stokes, I essentially just wrote this problem. And I did a little bit of work for the Euler case, which was in the first paper. In the Euler case, I was able to prove that if you have a smooth solution to Euler equation for a short time, you can recover this solution out of the minimization problem. And unfortunately, it is not true for all solutions. However, but I will not speak so much about that. Very interesting observation by a German colleague of mine in Paris 7, Helge Dietertz. He observed that in some cases that you don't get the right solution to the Euler equation, but we get a more interesting solution, which is a nice relaxed solution, which is quite relevant if you think in terms of turbulence theory. So it's a very exciting field, which is not really developed at the moment. and this is my main excitement at the moment. However, I wanted to focus on this minimization problem, which looks like a Schrödinger matrix-valued Schrödinger problem, or a noisy matrix-valued optimal transportation problem. And now I would like to finish my talk by making some comments, some remarks. So the first remark, for the people who are not aware of the Schrödinger problem, why is it called a Schrödinger problem? First of all, because it was set up by Schrödinger himself in 1931, and actually it was solved in a very nice way already at that time. And it is closely related to the Schrödinger equation. Why is it so? Which was created by Schrödinger in 1925. Because if you use the so-called Madlung formulation of the Schrödinger equation, when you write the wave function psi in polar form as the square root of something non-negative rho times e to the I theta, and to introduce the momentum q to be rho times the gradient of theta, then you can see that the wave solution of the linear Schrödinger equation is a critical point in rho q of the same action we saw before, but with the minus sign. So we have the kinetic energy minus the Fisher information. And the minus is essential to get a well-posed initial value problem, and also to get the wave formulation of the Schrödinger equation. And of course, I'm pretty sure that Schrödinger noticed that, knew that, because the paper of Hermann Madlung was published just 1 year after the first paper of Schrödinger. So I'm pretty sure that Schrödinger was aware of that, and he thought about the other problem with the plus, which is much more tractable, and which has a very nice interpretation in terms of stochastic analysis. And this is also the starting point of Nelson mechanics, Nelson interpretation of quantum mechanics. So this is remark 1. Now, remark 2, that's this optimization problem we saw for the Navier-Stokes equation is related to I think an emerging field which is of interest that I know essentially by the work of Tréfond, Georgiou and collaborators. I contributed with Dmitry Vorotnikov also to that, but I should mention, I should have mentioned that in the slides, that of course matrix valued optimal transportation problem is related also to 3 different things. It is related to free probability optimal transport problem, which was studied a long time ago by Bian and Voiculescu, and I think, and of course by Alice Guionnet and Shartenko at UCLA. It is also related to quantum transport problems studied recently by different teams. On one side by Jan Maas and Eric Carlin, very closely related to quantum mechanics. And on the other side by François Gols, Thierry Paul, Clément Mouot, and in connection with quantum particle problems. And this was also mentioned by, I think, by Silvia Serrati yesterday. Yes. So this is not only Tréfond and myself and Vorotnikov, it's much larger than that. And also it is also related, to the non-commutative geometry. And in the work of Alain Cohn, there is a non-commutative version of the Monge L1 optimal transport problem, actually. Okay, so first remark, see if I think, is it okay?
Yeah, you've got time, yep.
Oh, I think this remark will be exciting for at least for Roberts, I hope. So we saw that in the matrix valued problem, we have a kind of matrix valued Fisher information. So because we have this field of matrices, we have the divergence of M, and we have the inverse matrix in between. And this is as a formal structure of the Fisher information, where you would have gradient rho squared divided by rho. So rho now is M, so I get the inverse of M, and grad rho is substituted for by the divergence of M. So M is Mij, and the divergence of M is Dj Mij, so it's a vector field. And so this makes sense. So I must say that I'm not really, this might be a very well-known object. However, to me, it has a striking similarity with the Einstein action, at least in 4 space dimension, which, it's a very vague similarity. However, if you look at the Einstein action in 4D, and this is only in 4D for a reason I could explain, it's only in 4D. In 4D, you get the Lorentzian metric, of course. So J uppercase Ij is the inverse metric. And gamma is the connection we substitute for the derivative of J in some sense. It's the first order nonlinear operator acting on J. And of course, there is some skewness. This is not a square in the usual sense. It's a square, but not a positive square, of course. And there is an extra factor, which is the volume element of the Lorentzian manifold, which is square root of minus the determinant of G. And so in some sense, you have this funny, vague relationship between the Einstein equation, the Navier-Stokes equation, and also the Schrödinger equation. Because changing the sign in the Schrödinger problem is more or less like introducing some skewness in some sense in the square, where what you have also in the Einstein action. Okay, so you may know that there is also a very strong excitement about the connection between optimal transport and general relativity. And let me mention the recent work of Roberts on that, and also the synthetic formulation of the Einstein equation advocated recently by Andrea Mondino and his co-worker Zur in a very recent paper in the archive. So there is something going down. So my own contribution is very limited. It's just a very vague similarity between the Einstein action and one you can get from the Navier-Stokes equation by this optimization problem. Of course, I tried a lot to try to get the Einstein equation correctly, but so far I didn't do it. I didn't get anything. And I said maybe I should insist that this is only true in 4D, because this is not so known. If you look at the Hilbert-Einstein action for the Einstein equation, you get the Riemann, the scalar curvature, and the scalar curvature involves a second derivative of the metric, because the curvature is definitely second order derivative of the metric. However, there is something peculiar in 4D. The higher order derivatives in the action dropped out because they are null Lagrangian. And this is a null Lagrangian only in 4D. And this is why the effective action in the Einstein equation involves only first order derivative of the metric. And this is why the Einstein equation is a wave equation, it's a second order wave equation in the metric. If you write the Einstein equation in dimension larger than 4, this will be a fourth order wave equation. And this has been a very important point to single out the Einstein equation among all possible gravity, general relativity theory in 4D, which is not true in higher dimension. In higher dimension, you can play with different actions. In 4D, you are essentially locked with the Einstein action. It's really difficult to do any gravitation theory, classical gravitation theory, not using the Einstein equation. So it's funny that to see that in 4D, there is this relationship with the Fisher information. Okay. So now the final remark, which is a way to make a new connection with Alessio. is the problem I wrote for Navier-Stokes is very similar to if you change the boundary terms, you would collapse to the so-called Brödinger problem. So it's a joke due to, I guess, Arnaudon, Cruzeiro, Leonard, and Zambrini. I guess the joke is probably due to Zambrini. So Brödinger is a combination of Schrödinger and my own name. Because if you drop the epsilon in this problem, you get what in the field of optimal transportation, many people now call incompressible optimal transport problem, which is a continuous multi-marginal problem, if you want, with marginal constraints, which I used actually, I introduced in the 90s, and which was revisited very nicely and brightly by Luigi and Alessio. And actually, this was a part of the PhD of Alessio. So I don't know whether he did that already in Bonn or in Lyon or in Pisa or in some plane or in some train. And of course, the whole thing, the incompressible optimal transport problem is a kind of upgraded version of optimal transport problem in the sense that the optimality equation is no longer the Hamilton-Jacobi equation, which is rather straightforward because it describes the motion along straight lines or geodesics in the Riemannian setting. And it is ruled by the incompressible Euler equation, which is one of the nicest, oldest, maybe the oldest PD ever written, almost the oldest PD ever written, and one of the nicest and a very big challenge for analysts. So I think this is the end of my remarks. But now I have something special for Alessio and also for Francesco, but maybe they already know that. So I have a question for them about a quantitative version of the following isoperimetric inequality. I don't know if you know it. Let me see. So it's equal very little. This is the isoperimetric inequality in Arakelov geometry. So my friend, this is number theory. So this was done by a colleague in Paris 7. So of course he's of Chinese origin, but he was, I think he was a doctor, he did his postdoc and doctoral studies, I think, in Orsay. And using the Gromov-Knutte argument, the transportation argument, he was able to prove this inequality. So this is only a piece of the inequality. But so it looks really difficult. But since Alessio is known to be able to absorb a book within a couple of days, according to, I think this is Cédric Villani said that on Monday. I think it's really not difficult for him. And of course, they did the Knutte version of that. So they didn't use the optimal transportation of that because probably they are not aware of the interest of the quantitative version of the isoperimetric inequality, which was mentioned in the beautiful presentation of the work of Alessio by Francesco Maggi, which is a fantastic, acting, instead of doing politics as Cedric, I think that Francesco could easily go to Hollywood. Okay, so maybe for Alessio, because I see that he's writing down the name of the authors. So this is Wai Chen, okay? And this was published 1 year ago. So good luck, okay, for this quantitative version. So now, you know, I don't know if you were aware of that. So now optimal transportation is going from the Einstein equation to number theory in some sense, or can be used at least. I mean, I don't claim that number theory collapsed to the isoperimetry, but it's useful at least for Arakelov geometry. And you also know that Kählerian geometry is very much now related to optimal transport, in particular because of the very nice work of Robert Berman in Sweden. Okay, so now let me congratulate Alessio, and in this nice picture I stolen from the web, so I don't know if it's very okay. And you see that Alessio is enjoying this really nice little train in Zurich, which is called the Polybahn, which is a rack train, actually. And of course, I love also this little train, so we are sharing this passion for the Polybahn. And thank you very much for your attention, and many thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Jan. So let's see, we have time for questions. Oh, and sorry, I put up in the chat, so since the name of Trifon Giorgio and Matrix Transport came up, it happens that he's giving a talk in Toronto, a Zoom talk tomorrow afternoon. I put the link up in the chat since we're missing a talk this afternoon. Some of you may be interested. Are there questions for Jan?
Yeah, very good, thank you. And of course, Trifon is not the only one. So Tannenbaum was involved in that, and he has a collaborator. I think it's another Chen also, but I forgot. I'm not sure about the name. So sorry about that. And as I said, I should have related that to quantum optimal transport, to non-commutative optimal transport, and to free optimal transport, which are other way of introducing generalized density fields. And since Alice is participating in the meeting, I think she might mention that in her talk. I don't know. Okay. So Francesco, are you willing to start number theory, or maybe you did that in your past?
No, I actually I'm quite ignorant in number theory, but I mean this could be an occasion to be more educated in that. So I cannot make promises.
Maybe you have good friends in number theory. Don't say anything.
You're wiser than I am.
Dan, can I ask you a question? Sorry.
So who is speaking?
Maria. Maria Colombo.
Yeah, I recognize your voice. Yes.
Nice.
But I don't see.
Okay.
For some reason.
About the formulation for Navier-Stokes.
Yes.
Could you go back to that formulation? Because
okay, let me try.
And the question maybe is on which class of solutions you are minimizing.
Absolutely. Of course, I know that you have been working on the weak solution. So here again, the framework is really the framework of weak solution. I'm not talking about Leray solution.
So weak means distributional.
Yes. So I'm not talking about Leray solution. So for instance, if you collapse to the Euler case where epsilon is 0, yes. You can rephrase the problem in terms of a generalized solution in the sense of convex integration. So I'm just at the moment forgetting the name of this kind of a sub-solution. Yes. So in the Euler case, this can be also rephrased in terms of sub-solution. So for Navier-Stokes, I didn't follow very closely the very exciting recent works you are involved in about the Navier-Stokes equation using convex integration, but clearly this kind of idea of problem is related to the concept of subsolution. So in some sense, you can work on that without knowing anything about Leray solution, which is a little bit what I said for the viscosity solution. In some sense, the Leray solution are more contained than weak solution. They are more subtle, and this is why so far I don't think there is any new result on the non-uniqueness of Leray solution. I think it's still a very largely open problem. Also, for weak solution, we know after Vlad Vikol and co-author that you may construct many weak solution of the Navier-Stokes equation. And Maria, you were involved in the result with hyperviscosity and to find the threshold in the hyperviscosity from which you can uniqueness. I am correct?
Yes.
I think I listened to your talk I remember you talk in Budapest.
Okay. But what I don't understand, since in that case is usually you can choose the kinetic energy. I don't understand why you don't always find 0 as the minimum in this.
No. I mean, this would be, yeah, actually I was asked a similar question because the V0 matters and prevents that in some sense. So the initial condition, because of course in the convex integration theory, there are many results where in some sense you forget about the initial condition and you get another initial condition with a larger energy in some sense. So I'm sorry, it's very confusing what I'm saying. But okay, if you look at a very simple problem like the Burger's equation, at the Toy problem like the Burger's equation, you can completely analyze the problem and there is no, the minimum is not 0. Anyway, the minimum is bounded from below by the second number, and the second number is strictly positive, actually. So
Okay.
for Burgers, for the Navier-Stokes, I didn't check, but for Euler, for instance, there are many situations like that, where the minimum is not, this is not 0. Because you cannot play so much with the initial condition as you could do in many results in the convex integration, I believe. Okay, I remember I was asked a similar question by, I think by Laszlo some years ago.
Okay.
And,
But
but this was in the Euler case.
is-
This was, at that time, it was in the Euler case, where epsilon is 0. So for Navier-Stokes, I should be more careful because I didn't present this work so often. So you are the first person to ask me this question for Navier-Stokes. But I think I'm pretty confident that there is no problem with this.
But V0 for you is an L2 function.
Yeah, okay. So you may argue that if V0 is not smooth, something may happen. So that could be. Yes.
Okay.
But even that, so for instance, with in the Euler case, with Helge Dietert looked at the case of a shear flow, like in the Kelvin-Helmholtz instability, and he found that the solution is non-trivial and extremely interesting, actually. So we are working on that at the moment.
Okay.
Sorry, who
Can
is
I
that?
ask a question?
You working with?
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Who
okay.
is that, Ian?
Yes.
Who are you working with, did you say?
I mean, this was it's essentially a discussion with Helge Dietert.
Okay.
So it's I think he's a member. Yeah, I forgot to say that. This is a good opportunity. Helge Dietert is a member, is a young member of CNRS, and I forgot to say that the first permanent position that Alessio got was a junior CNRS permanent position. So it's a little bit like in Italy, where you could be a permanent junior person, which I think it's not a so bad idea.
And it didn't last very long.
We overlapped because at that time Alessio was in Nice, and I was also in Nice. So we overlapped in the beautiful city of Nice.
For 1 year.
That's correct, yes, because then Alessio moved to École Polytechnique, so he stayed in France for another year before crossing the ocean.
So was there one more question for Ian?
Yeah.
Duncan.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So yeah, thanks for a very nice talk. So when I talk about,
sorry, I don't see the.
You need
Yeah,
to
this
go,
is-
Yan. Yan, if you go to gallery view, you'll see everyone.
Yeah, the problem is, so I lost that gallery.
Okay.
Sorry. So
Yeah.
can you give me your name?
yeah, this is Zhenfen from
Okay.
Duke.
Okay.
So when I talk about Power's media or the Hamming-Jacobi equation, you mentioned that you assume quadratic nonlinearity for simplicity.
Yes.
I was wondering, for this convex formulation, what kind of nonlinearity in general you can deal with?
Well, I mean, if you do, actually, I mean, I looked at that recently with Jose Antonio Carrillo. So there is, if you take typically a power of power law, then the theory is exactly the same, and you get the generalized version of Aronson-Benillon. Now, if you take a nonlinearity, which is not a power law, I don't know. Yeah. This might be interesting to look at. For instance, there is a logarithmic nonlinearity, which is related to the Ricci flow in two space dimension, right? Where you have and also I was myself involved in the arctangential version of where you have the inverse tangent instead of the square, and but a part of the game can be done. So you get a convex minimization problem. The formulation is not so nice because you have to introduce the Legendre transform of some function. But at least in the polar law case, the Aronson-Benillan works precisely right. So it's exactly what you need to prove that the density doesn't vanish before time zero.
All right.
So
maybe can I ask a question?
Okay, Alessio, yeah.
So yeah, I was wondering, you mentioned that, so you have this kind of matrix value formulation, and you mentioned connections also tends to this non-commutative optimal transport, and this idea of transporting matrices, which is also what Alice Guionnet has been interested in, right? But I didn't understand whether this kind of, the fact that you are minimizing over matrices, you think it's a way to define a non-commutative optimal transport, or
no. Actually, I think in my formulation, I guess I was sufficiently careful to write that it can be seen as a very special example. So it's very special because this continuity equation is a big constraint. So, for instance, you see that M. For the continuity equation, it's very easy for the time derivative of a density to be a divergence, because the divergence operator is almost onto. It's almost, yeah. But here, this has a non-trivial kernel, and therefore you have some constraint on M, and this prevents you to deal with the optimal transportation problem where M is prescribed at time 0 and time t without further constraints. And I'm not so sure that it's such a nice problem. And this is why, for instance, in the paper with Borotnikov, the idea is to drop completely the right-hand side and to keep from this generalized continuity equation only the left-hand side, and to put an unknown right-hand side, like in unbalanced optimal transportation theory. And then you get a kind of problem for which you can address the 2-point boundary value problem in time. But actually, it is mentioned already in I mean, this is actually, Trifon actually mentioned that in one of his papers already.
Right.
So the very nice connection with the unbalanced, you know, some people could consider that unbalanced optimal transport is not so important because transporting a measure of different mass is maybe not so exciting. But actually, in the matrix valued setting, this is a way to get rid of a very severe constraint that you would have if you would keep only the two first terms. So if you had DTM plus grad Q plus grad Q transposed, this will be a very severe constraint for M. You see what I mean? So M0 and M1 should be on the same orbit of some constraint. And therefore, this would probably make the theory more difficult. This also something which happens with optimal transport of differential forms, or like Wilfried Gangbo and Da Coruña do. They very often they end up with some constraint problem, which makes the analysis more difficult, I believe. So it's a very special kind. And on top of that, it's really a mean field game. It's not an optimal transport problem. It's not a planning problem. So you have an initial condition, which is V0, and a final condition for M. So it's a backward-forward system, actually, if you write the optimality equation. Is it satisfactory?
Yeah, thank you.